He spent 2 years making me look unstable. I let him explain that at his own party. Daniel was the kind of man who made you feel lucky to be chosen by him. Attentive in the beginning, thoughtful in ways that felt specific to you, like he'd studied what made you feel seen and filed it away for later use. I met him through mutual friends at a rooftop gathering, and by the end of that night, he had my number, my attention, and apparently a very detailed plan I knew nothing about. We dated for 2 years. For most of that time, I thought we were building something real. The first sign I missed was how my friendships started thinning out. My closest friend Renee became distant around the 8-month mark. Short replies, long gaps, a cooling I couldn't explain. I mentioned it to Daniel. He shook his head and said he'd noticed too. Said she'd made a dismissive comment about me once but hadn't wanted to say anything. I felt grateful he was paying attention. It happened with 2 other friends over the following year. Distance I couldn't explain, followed by Daniel offering a quiet observation that reframed their behavior as the problem. He never said anything dramatic, just planted small seeds and let me water them with my own anxiety. By month 18, I was more isolated than I'd ever been and had no idea how I got there. Renee texted me on a Wednesday night, a long message, the kind you draft and delete multiple times before sending. She said she'd run into Daniel at a coffee shop with a woman she didn't recognize. Close, comfortable, the kind of body language that doesn't belong to coworkers. She said she was sorry for being distant and felt she owed me an explanation. We talked for 3 hours. Renee told me Daniel had been calling her periodically for over a year, expressing concern about me, he called it. Told her I'd been struggling emotionally, saying paranoid things, pushing people away without realizing it. He said it with such genuine care that she believed him completely. She had adjusted how she treated me based on a version of me he built entirely from lies. I called my other 2 friends that same night. Both had received versions of the same conversation. Different details, same architecture. Daniel, the devoted, worried boyfriend, quietly warning everyone around me that I was becoming someone difficult to love. He had spent 18 months making me look unstable so that anything I ever said about him would land on already prepared ground. His friend Marcus was throwing a birthday party that Saturday. Rented venue, open bar, 60 or 70 people. Daniel had been looking forward to it for weeks. I was already invited. I went. I arrived 40 minutes after he did. Found him near the bar, relaxed, laughing. He smiled when he saw me and pulled me in by the waist. I let him. I said hello to the group and waited for a natural pause. Then I asked him, in the calm, even tone I'd been practicing since Wednesday, if he could explain to the people standing with us what he'd told Renee about my mental state, and Kara, and Justine. The smile didn't fall immediately. It took 2 full seconds. That was the tell. He needed those 2 seconds to calculate, and the fact that he needed them at all was its own confession. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. I told him that was interesting because all 3 of them remembered their conversations in considerable detail. Renee had kept screenshots. All 3 knew I was having this conversation right now. The group around us went quiet. He shifted into damage control with a smoothness that confirmed he'd done this before. Said I'd been talking to people who misunderstood him, that he'd only ever been trying to help, that maybe this reaction was exactly what he'd been concerned about. I nodded slowly. I told him framing my response as proof of his concern was a very clean move. I told him I wasn't angry, and I wasn't making a scene. I was simply making sure the people in his life had the same information I now had, because he'd spent a long time making sure the people in my life had a version of me that didn't exist. I set my drink on the bar, said goodnight to Marcus, and left. He texted 4 times before I reached my car. I read none of them. I drove home with the windows down and felt something settle in my chest that had been restless for a long time. Not happiness, just clarity.